Hello, everyone, and thank you, Karen, for that introduction. My friend Randy, whom I really admire, preempted my use of it, but this is a metaphor. This couch is a metaphor. This will not be as literary a presentation as Lori made this afternoon, but I do tend to be involved in a lot of meetings that relate to the Multiple Sclerosis Society, and often they do last, as this one does, for several days, and it's almost inevitable, it seems, that at the end of the last day I'm asked to say something. And while I'm, as I've said before, really on the lucky end of people with multiple sclerosis, I do have a good bit of fatigue near the ends of days. Sometimes I think these meetings are set up as sort of an experiment to see if we can induce fatigue in the people with MS who are in the room. And I suspect that we may have sufficient numbers here that would be a statistically significant sample that we might be able to test from. But I certainly am going to take advantage of this actual couch, not merely a metaphorical couch, but take advantage of this couch and take off my jacket. Ow, yes. And recline. And I hope you can hear me. I can hear my echo, though I cannot see you. But lying on the couch is often associated in our thinking with talk therapy and with Sigmund Freud, whom I also admire, not as much as I admire Randy, but whom I also admire. And Sigmund Freud actually has a tangential relationship to the history of the science of multiple sclerosis. But when I lie on a couch and think about Freud, it reminds me of what I think is a very funny joke. And there was a picture in the Star Tribune this morning of a Weimaraner wearing snow boots and a ski cap, which also reminded me of this joke. Two dogs are having a conversation. The first dog says to the second dog, his friend, "You're going crazy. You need to see a psychiatrist." The second dog says, "Well, I'm a big believer in talk therapy, but I'm not allowed on the couch." But I'm a big believer myself in talk therapy, and I engage in it whenever I can manage. My therapist does not ask me to lie on a couch. He sits in a comfortable chair. I sit in a comfortable chair. He looks at me non-threateningly and somehow induces me to answer the questions that I've brought to him. And some people would say that's not worth hundreds of dollars an hour, but it does seem to it does seem to work. But I do often use a couch in my own time without paying hundreds of dollars per hour. And I do think a lot about multiple sclerosis research now, and I think a lot about the history of the science of multiple sclerosis. The first figure I've ever heard about who is associated with the history of the science of multiple sclerosis is the British pathologist Robert Carswell. And I've read stories about Carswell taking brains and drawing very, very intricate etchings and drawings of the brains. And Carswell was the first one to notice the things we refer to as lesions now. And I think pathology is very important. And I've often said that I think it'd be important for all of us who consider ourselves donors to the National MS Society to consider, if we have multiple sclerosis, making a donation we wouldn't be looking forward to of our brains to the good brain banks that are around the country for study of multiple sclerosis. I'm intending to make that donation myself, though I'm not in a hurry about it. But it was not Carswell who was able to make the link between those lesions that he saw. It was a French scientist Carswell was in the middle of the 19th century. A French scientist, Jean-Marie Charcot, who is thought of as the father of neurology, who in about 1869 linked those lesions that Carswell had found to symptoms that he observed, especially in a woman who worked for him. He noticed the slowness of gait, and he was able to make that connection. Now, the tangential connection between Sigmund Freud and the history of the science of multiple sclerosis is that Charcot was one of Freud's teachers, or Freud was one of Charcot's students. But the thing that really rankles me, even though I admire from a long distance the work of Carswell and Charcot, is that the discovery that, or the connection that Charcot made was in 1869, a long time ago. That was exactly 100 years before I even graduated from high school. And during that time, as all of us in this room know, there was not significant advance made toward understanding the disease in depth. And so I see that the stories of those two scientists, as important as they are, they really collide with my personal stories. I learned about multiple sclerosis, I guess, when I was about 5 years old, when I realized that my Aunt Aline had MS, and that she was always in a wheelchair or in a bed. I learned more about multiple sclerosis from my father, who was diagnosed later in the 1950s, and who had a different course of the disease, but which was relapsing and remitting for a long time, and then was secondary progressive.